Hi guys, I had a couple questions about the timeline, so I just wanted to go through real quick. I know this is a bit of a confusing book for you guys, but I just want you to really focus on pages 50 to 60. What Beatty is saying about how firemen came to be. Beatty shows up at their house on page 50, and he knows that Montag is questioning his own career, and so he starts talking to Montag about how things happened, why we now have the society where it's all about pleasure and books aren't read and nobody takes time to think and everybody just does what they want and what's pleasurable. No one asks why anymore. Everybody thinks they're happy, but they're really not. So when you're doing your timeline, the timeline starts at the Civil War, which is discussed on page 51. Beatty says, when did it all start, you ask? This job of ours? How did it come about? Where? When? Well, I'd say it really got started around a thing called the Civil War, even though our rule book claims it was founded earlier. The fact is, we didn't get along well until photography came into its own. Then motion pictures in the early 20th century, radio, television, things began to have mass. So when you're doing your timeline and you start with the Civil War, the first event is the invention of photography, right? It's the first thing he lists. And then he starts talking about the beginning of the 20th century, which is the early 1900s, with the invention of motion pictures, movies. So I would label photography, invention of photography right after the Civil War. And then I would label, the invention of movies. And then he talks about radio, television. When he talks about mass, it's just like all these different ways to get your information. You go from not being able to get your information and there's a slower pace of society, and then all of a sudden there's 50 different ways to get your information, get your news, get your updates. And so everybody's competing as to who, how people are going to use this knowledge, this news. So because they're competing over who, whether it's radio or movies or TV, everyone starts scaling down their information. It's a paste pudding. It's a spark notes. Give me what I need to know so I can move on and have fun with my life. So once again, it's that Civil War, photography, the invention of movies in the early 1900s, and then it just kind of goes from there on 51. So Beatty just talks about how there are so many different ways to get your information, and they boil it down. It says on 52, picture it, 19th century man, that's 1800s, with his horses and dog carts in slow motion. Then in the 20th century, speed up your camera, books cut short, condensations, digests, tabloids, everything is boiled down to a gag, the snap ending. So that's another thing you could put, as then we have like kind of a after, movies and radio and all those things and television. Now people start cutting down books, making it more of a spark notes, which is what he talks about here. Classics are boiled down to 15-minute radio shows. Nobody enjoys Hamlet anymore. Speed up the film, Montag. School is shortened. So now you go to 53, you could list on the timeline. School is shortened. Discipline relaxed. Philosophies, histories, languages are dropped. So now we see a change in education. English and spelling gradually neglected. Think about that. Like, there's lots of schools that don't teach cursive anymore. They don't do spelling tests. So that also could go on your timeline. Now, obviously, it doesn't give you a specific date, but if you follow this chronologically, you'll be able to label those things on your timeline. Then it starts talking about just sports and things of that nature. Nobody wants to be triggered anymore. This is at the bottom of 54. Now let's take up the minorities in our civilization, shall we? Bigger the population, the more minorities. Don't step on the toes of the dog lovers, the cat lovers, the doctors, the lawyers, the merchants, the chiefs, the Mormons, the Baptists, the Unitarians, the second generation Chinese. So then he talks about how no one wants to offend anybody anymore, because the more, the population is now getting larger. That's another event. And with the population getting larger, there's more minorities, more people to be offended. And he says everybody's getting offended. The bigger your market, the less you handle controversy. Remember that. The more people, the less people handle differences of opinion. Nobody can handle it. And then it talks about how we were the ones that kind of destroyed the books. They took it, the government took advantage of our ignorance. We stopped reading. The government, it didn't come from the government down. There was no decorum, no declaration, no censorship to start with. No, technology, mass exploitation, and minority pressure carried the trick, thank God. So he says it was, the creation of television and celebration and entertainment. And then also this idea that we had so many people in the world and everybody was offended. So people stopped writing books because they were scared they were going to offend somebody. And people stopped reading books because they didn't want to be offended. So you could also put that in your timeline. Let's see here. So those are just a few examples. So from 50 to 60, he lists a ton of stuff that you could put on your timeline. So I just know I still had some people confused about that. If you have any more confusion, let me know. But really, you're just going chronologically through. You don't know the specific dates. So you're just going chronologically from Civil War to today. And I want you to label for me where you feel like we are in society. Are we dumbing down our books? Are we trying not to trigger anybody? So make sure you label that part on your timeline. If you have additional questions, let me know and I'll be around to help. But hopefully that helps you out as you're working forward on all your stuff. I hopefully will see you soon. I'm sorry I look a hot mess. I'm a mess. I just took my ponytail down and now I feel like I look pretty ratchet. All right. I will see you guys soon. If you have any more questions, just send me a message, email me, Discord me, whatever. I'm still trying to figure that out. So I'll talk to you soon. Bye.